Let us pray. Loving Lord, we give you thanks for your presence with us this evening and ask that you guide all of our discussions and debates with your wisdom, justice, and compassion. Help us to be mindful and considerate of each other's unique perspectives on the many issues we all face. Lord, we ask that you grant our counselors patience and skill to debate the concerns of improving economic, social, and environmental well-being, and to prioritize the island's limited resources to address the greatest needs of the people on the Isle of Wight. We hold before you, Lord, the well-being of those counselors unable to be with us this evening. May your healing presence be with all of them. Lord, many people are too busy to give their time and talents in the service of their community. We give thanks to you for this council's commitment to working together for the greater good of all on the Isle of Wight. We pray for them as they carry their good work forward today, through this Christmas season and into the new year. And Lord, as we meet, we hold before you those whose needs we aim to serve. Those suffering with health problems, those who are living in deprived situations, without clean clothing, without enough food, without enough shelter, those who are at risk of isolation, children at risk of exclusion, the unemployed, those who are in unsafe situations. May we all do our part to feed, clothe, and shelter the hungry, poor, and oppressed. And so, Lord, we commit this evening's proceedings into your loving care. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Veronica, for those absolutely perfect words this evening. Thank you. Could I please remind everyone to switch your mobile phones off or to airplane mode, please, so that we don't have those interruptions. Thank you. Once again, welcome everybody to this evening's meeting. Can I please remind you all that this is being live streamed, and I know we've got quite a lot of people already watching. So could you please be mindful of one another in the chamber? Thank you very much. Apologies for absence this evening. Michael Merwell, Carl Love, Rodney Downer, Julia Baker-Smith, and I think Ian Ward is going to be a bit late if he's not here. Oh, right, and Councillor Perks, that's a new one. Move on to item 1 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting. Could somebody please propose that they're happy with those? Proposed by Councillor Whitehouse, seconded by Councillor Charles Chapman. Okay. Members, item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 4, no parking fees for Rye Town. Just to say, because obviously there's been proposals for increased parking charging areas in Newport and Wight, the street where my shop is, has been particularly named in the budget proposals. Should the discussion go to Newport, I'm declaring a pecuniary interest and I shall leave the chamber. That's not to say that I don't want to stifle debates. I'm just being upfront.
Are there any other declarations of interest this evening? No, thank you very much. Okay, we have a number of questions from members of the public, and the first one is... Oh, right. Why are we starting with written then? Okay. Written question, Tanya Rebel of Cowes.
Thank you, and good evening. Can the Isle of Wight Council please confirm that they will await the result of independent health and environmental impact assessments, in other words, assessments which are independent from industry and government, and conduct public consultations before 5G wireless technology is implemented on the island without public consent?
I think Councillor Hobart will deal with that for us.
Thank you, Chair. If I could refer Ms. Rebels to the answer I gave regarding this topic during public question time at the recent Isle of Wight Cabinet meeting held on the 8th of November. Due in part to our physical separation from the mainland, placing the island at the forefront of any advances in communication technologies must be seen as vitally important to economic growth and our future prosperity. Technology will also play an increasing part in helping people live better lives and assist with addressing some of our key challenges as a community, particularly in the field of health and social care. With all this in mind, improving connectivity is a key aim of our digital island ambitions and investment by communication providers, such as Wight Fibre, to upgrading our infrastructure will be key. Deployment of 5G wireless communications is being tested in pilot communities on the mainland, and the Isle of Wight will want to consider the results of these tests, along with all available evidence in terms of health and environment impacts, before considering any introduction of 5G on the island. In addition to the above, the Isle of Wight Council would seek to ensure any proposals that do come forward are preceded by appropriate public consultations. Thank you, Chair.
Is there a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hobart. I'm glad you're awaiting evidence. May I ask, I have provided the democratic officers with such evidence, various links which have been sent to her. Can this be made available to all councillors, please, so that when time comes, a democratic decision is made in this? Thank you.
Yeah, as I said, all evidence will be taken into consideration, whether it's from industry or whether it's from government. We'll take all the evidence into our consideration.
Thank you.
That's the end of the written questions, so now it's on to oral questions. And first up is Cameron, please.
Thank you. According to a revised business case, Floating Bridge 6 has been under warranty for 15 months. How can this be true if the floating bridge has not yet been officially accepted by the Isle of Wight Council? How can it be under a warranty paid for by the council without it being accepted?
I'll send you a written reply, but in summary, the warranty was extended.
Thank you. And if there is a warranty, why is the taxpayer also paying out for all of the fixes?
Because some of the development work is not under the original warranty, but is to improve the vessel.
Next is Nick Stewart here this evening. Hello, Nick. Nick, you've submitted 2 questions, but I'm afraid you're only allowed to put one forward. So which one is your priority, please?
I think one is the one that I'm going to put forward from local area coordinators. I understand there's a number of other people who are concerned about that issue, so I'll stick with the one on military road.
Okay, thank you.
Now he's turned it on. I'm glad somebody knows how modern technology works. Thank you. First of all, I apologise for not making this a written question. Various personal things have made it impossible. The question is, given the recent resurfacing of the military road, when will the council produce a strategic plan with key stakeholders to maintain the road into the future, and how will it control speeding cars and motorbikes?
Nick, thank you very much for your question, first of all, and you're absolutely right. I think the Council, through Island Roads, are very pleased that we've been able to do a number of positive pieces of work into the West Wight. The resurfacing of the Military Road follows on to the excellent piece of work with the viaduct, which you'll be familiar with, at Bryston and Brook, which I think, by anybody's accounts, is a very, very positive development. The contract with Island Roads is one of those contracts where not only do they have to, in the core period, maintain or bring the roads up to standard, which is what they've done at the Military Road, but for the next 18 years, they are, under the contract, obliged to maintain the standard of the road. So the good news for you, and indeed for all those who venture onto the Military Road, such as me, and I declare an interest, occasionally go down to the surfing area, not to surf, but to watch, it is a really positive piece of work. But you're absolutely right. The second issue, which Councillor Hastings in particular from your ward area has been constantly concerned about, is the speed of the motorcyclists and other vehicles, which had already caused some concerns, but now with a very, very smooth surface, may be tempted to speed to excessive levels on that road, and I know a lot of residents are concerned. We certainly are. I know that the police have been engaged with us on what we can do to get some calming down. I even think ultimately it may come down to putting in some mobile cameras which are distance related rather than at on the spot, because somebody will get killed on a motorcycle on that road if they do what they've been doing in previous years. So I think you've raised a really useful point. I'm pleased that we're on top of the situation with the road, and I can assure you that Councillor Atwell in particular, who's our community safety lead, will be following that up.
Thank you. Just briefly, thank you for that, and I'm very pleased that the Council have taken that particular issue seriously. I will bring you back to the strategic problem. There is no formal strategic plan that I'm aware of, and that National Trusts are aware of, and a number of other bodies are not aware of, for maintaining the Military Road into the future. I'm simply hoping that at some stage the Council will be able to produce that strategic plan in consultation with others.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're also referring probably to the what I call the far end for me, coming from Knighton of the Military Road, where actually we're talking about as it goes up over the hill and down into freshwater, because there are some concerns there that over the next few years that road may have to be redirected or whatever because of that. There are positive sides to that, because I've heard people say it would make a fantastic area of outstanding national beauty, which people could enjoy without vehicles on it. But on the other hand, again, as I say to many people, that is a crucial artery really from the West Wight through to other parts of the island. So we are aware of that. It is being looked at, and we need to be doing some work over the next few years to decide how we're going to take that forward, and we're in consultation with a range of people. So I'm glad you've highlighted it. It shows it is in the mind of the Council as much as anybody else, and I thank you for your question.
Next we have Catherine Pugh from Ryde, please.
Hello, thank you. I wanted to say, I know that you're having a discussion later on about the island's bid for national park status, but if all the planned developments go ahead in and around Ryde, then it will be too late to save this area. Can there be any revoking of planning decisions, or at least a cap put on further applications?
My answer to you would be that the Isle of Wight Council is duty bound to act within the lawful planning regulations of the country, and none of the planning committee would be able to respond to you because they must remain impartial. What I would say is we are very aware of some of the impact of some of the past planning decisions in areas such as Ryde, but the fact is we have to live with them. Nobody in this chamber can guarantee you that a planning application which is based on proper planning conditions wouldn't be approved, because if we were to reject them, there's an inspector in Bristol who will just overturn it because that's their job. So all I can say to you is the planning committee, and I've been in several meetings now, will give it their fair and proper assessment, each and every one on their own merits, which I think is the right way to do it.
Well, is the National Planning Department taking into account that the island is a very different place to the rest of the mainland?
So you will hear later about meetings that have been held with government, even in the last few days over that area, so that may answer your question. I'm not trying to put you off, but I think you might find that interesting.
Yeah, sure, thank you very much.
We have about another 7 minutes if anyone would like to ask a question.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Mark Jewerton from RIDE. I'm asking this really on behalf of Unison members. I have written to Councillor Mosdell about this and copied this to all councillors just a few minutes ago. But it really, I know there were questions about this at the Cabinet, but I'd like to ask this of particularly Councillor Mosdell, given the growing public concern and which was already intense around the whole issue of the withdrawal of the LAC service, is the Council prepared to consider putting that decision on hold, given the impact that that is likely to have on some of the most vulnerable sections of the community, given the fact that it's a preventative service which if withdrawn, could have a massive impact on public expenditure? Given that, are they prepared to do that, have a full public consultation involving service users and staff to enable full consideration of all the detail, and also to allow the possible development of meaningful alternatives? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to refer you to Councillor Mosdell's request, but I will make it clear now so that there's no managing expectation. There won't be any change of the decision, but you may be interested to hear what Councillor Mosdell will summarise to you as a guide of what we said we would do at the Cabinet meeting and what we are doing.
Thank you. Can I make it very clear, as Councillor Stewart has said, that the decision has been made, but we are looking at the people who are already registered with the local area coordinators, and a very thorough transition will be carried out for those people who are currently using the services. We are having, as we said, as part of the recommendations, a task and finish group into early community resilience. That has already been booked to go on to adult social care scrutiny, and so then that paper will be taken to the local care board. So we can look at ensuring that we look at how the LAC service was run, the type of people that use the service, and how we can ensure that in the future we have proper community resilience that is commissioned correctly in the first place.
Is there a supplementary question?
Yeah, there is. Given the mounting public dismay about this, is it possible, in terms of any further work that's done on this, that there can be involvement of service users and staff in terms of considering all the issues? Because there is a great concern among staff that many of those issues have not yet been properly considered, and the decision may have been based on a number of misunderstandings.
Can I make this very clear that this task and finish group will be working with service users? We had the first meeting this week. There were several councillors. It was a very sort of hand-picked committee. So Councillor Andre will be in it, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Hastings, Community Action. There will be volunteers from HUK, a representative from Freshwater. And one of the things that was raised is that we would have input from service users. I have to make this really clear that this will not be funded from public health. It will be funded. I think Councillor Lilly's got some very good ideas that we're going to take on board for how it will be future funded, but this will be taken to local care board and funded as it should be across the whole system. So input from the CCG, from the Trust and off itself, so we can make sure it's funded for early prevention.
Okay, we have time for one more question if there's somebody that wishes to speak. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Diana Conyers from RIDE, and I'm a volunteer with the Citizens Advice, both in the new Isle Health Centre here and in RIDE. My question also relates to the local area coordinators. I just wondered whether the council is aware that the programme of referring clients by the local area coordinators back has already started, and what they're doing is either referring clients back to the mainline services such as adult social services and mental health if they were referred from them, and these are people who were referred from those services because they didn't have the services didn't have the capacity to deal with them. They're now referring them back into the queue. Or alternatively, if they were self-referred, they're signposting them, in other words, giving them information about possible services, including citizens' advice, to whom we've already had some people pass back, and we don't have the capacity to deal with that sort of a client. Thank you.
I think it's in the next couple of days that I can't get involved in the operational, what is happening with the people that have been dealt with by that service. It's a very operational matter. I have got a meeting with the senior managers from public health to ensure that the people who are using the service are being addressed properly. But that I can report back, and I'm quite happy to put that in writing if you can give your name to you in the next few days. I am aware that you work for Citizens Advice.
I've been told we can take one more question if there's someone that wishes to come forward with a question. Moving on then to item number 4 on the agenda is to receive a petition, no parking fees for Wight Town. Karen Lucioni. Okay. You've got 5 minutes, so take your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to present the People's Petition relating to parking fees for Wight Town. This petition shows the depth of support of Ryde residents who are extremely supportive of their town, local independent businesses, and the impact on residents living in the area. 3,851 have already signed, and no public consultation has seen a response like this in such a short space of time. Our town and businesses in Ryde need to be supported to survive and flourish for many reasons. We are a commuter town, one of the main gateways to our island, and first impressions count. We do not want the image of our island blighted by a high street full of closed shops. We need to encourage and assist businesses to thrive and prosper. I believe, and so do thousands of people who have signed the petition, that introducing parking charges for the town centre will badly affect the town centre businesses and lead to closures as a result of people altering their shopping habits. Up and down the country, town centres are falling into terminal decline as people move away from paying for parking to shop in towns. Shoppers are being drawn to out-of-town stores with free parking and easy access. I do hope no more out-of-town developments are planned for Ryde. Internet shopping also puts pressure on our town's independent retailers. The situation is becoming so bad across the island and nationally that central government has promised to give assistance by cutting business rates by 1/3 for retailers. The Isle of Wight Council seems to be considering decisions that are opposite to the government plan to help our high streets. It seems an enormous contradiction to be encouraging shops and town centres with reduced business rates while making it more difficult to visit them. I hear talk of investing in tackling loneliness, yet we put barriers in place for people who are able to pop to their local town, shop, meet and pass time whilst rejuvenating our towns. Thousands have disagreed with your proposals by signing this petition because your proposals are going to impact and affect our town very badly. I urge you all to think very carefully about the current proposals. On the council's own website, it states, our aim is to provide a service and consistent approach to all elements of parking management that will support the local community while proving beneficial to residents, tourists and businesses. However, this proposal does not take this into consideration whatsoever. Instead, it will deliver the exact opposite. We need to be supporting our shops and businesses locally. I acknowledge that every town on the Isle of Wight suffers from similar issues and realise that pressures on parking need to be considered, but, and it is a big but, it must not, cannot and should not be a one-size-fits-all scenario for parking. Ryde needs its own parking strategy. I have spoken with businesses and residents and they would like some of these issues addressed. changing Union Street to one parking zone 7 days a week, keeping at least 60 minutes free parking, reasonably priced business parking permits, as car park charges are too high for those working all day in our town on minimum wage. Without this, I believe it will have a huge impact on our already overloaded side streets, with more people looking for free parking. I do welcome the news that business associations are meeting with the council later this month. It is also the case, however, that individual residents who stand to pay the price are without a voice and a formal forum in which to raise their collective concerns. This petition delivers that collective voice of thousands of your residents who have spoken. I urge you all to please listen to your community, those you represent. Consider the wider effects of your policies and think seriously about the cause and effect of your decisions. The island is watching your response to this petition closely. Please listen to their wishes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Axford, this is your ward. Do you wish to speak? You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, can I thank Karen Lucioni for the speech she's just given, the facts she's given, and for her work in compiling this particular, this particular petition. And as I only have a short time to speak, can I say right at the beginning that I personally am also against any attempt to charge for parking in this area. My ward contains most of the shopping area of Ryde, Union Street, High Street, and Cross Street and so on. And I agree with her that I think that our shops are already suffering too much competition from both online shopping and out-of-town shopping centres, and we should help the shops as much as possible. If I can just expand on the mention she made of shopping of zones for parking, I'm sure we're all familiar with the signs which say 1 hour free parking, no return within an hour, but we have an anomaly in Union Street, our main shopping street, where it's divided up into 4 different areas for some reason, and this is a well-kept secret, which is not secret anymore after we discussed it tonight. But if you can imagine Union Street, each side is different, so that's 2 zones, and then halfway down there's a little break, so you've got the top half and the bottom half. So people can move from one zone to the next zone and then wait for another hour. And obviously some people take advantage of this. Word on the street is that some of the people who do that are people who work there all day. In other words, the shopkeepers and their staff who actually work there. And we're trying to keep the areas free from that. So one of the proposals is that the whole of the street will be one parking zone, and you will not be permitted to just zigzag across like a pinball machine for all day to park there. That does make it very unfair on other people. So we have discussed this at Ryde Town Council level. Karen and I are both members of Ryde Town Council, and I can't speak for Ryde Town Council, but I'm sure that all of the members would be against the proposals to charge for parking for the reasons which we've said. And at our meeting recently, we had, during public question time, one of the members of Ryde Business Association suggested that where at the moment we have parking limited to 1 hour during weekdays, that this doesn't apply on Sunday, and so the place is chock-a-block with parked cars all day, and that we ought to bring in 1 hour parking on Sundays as well. This might be a two-edged sword, and I would ask possibly Karen to check with her contacts and people who've spoken to her about it, because of course the people I represent who live in the flats above the shops in Union Street, they want somewhere to park at the weekend. So they wouldn't be quite so keen on that idea, but we may have to find a compromise for that. So I would ask, I'm not sure from the administrative instructions we were given, whether this, I can propose a motion at this stage, but I would certainly recommend that the Cabinet reconsider the parking fees in Ryde in its budget recommendations to full council.
Okay, members, you now have 15 minutes to debate. Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Brodie.
Chair, thank you. Can I also firstly thank Councillor Luciani from Ryde for all those who have signed the petition and for expressing their concerns in this way. It is one of the benefits, of course, of the Conservative administration's approach to an early and open, transparent sharing of our issues. for next year's budget that has enabled such feedback to be received. Had we waited until January, it would have been too late for her or any of the residents to be able to formulate and submit a petition. And this is what we've given by coming out really early. It also builds on the representations already made by Councillor Whittle some time ago to the Cabinet, and he did also at the Cabinet on the Road in Ryde publicly express his concerns on this issue. Obviously, I look forward now to receiving the alternative suggestions, some of which you started to list, and I'm grateful for that. I'll be pleased if you can forward those through, and indeed anyone else, because you said you represent a number of people who may not feel they've got access, perhaps through their town and parish council or their councillors. You can absolutely send them in direct, and we will take them into consideration. And I would add that members of the Cabinet have since met with Newport Business Association, who expressed similar concerns regarding parking charges in Newport, and which are also supported by a significant number of signatures. I am pleased to say that during that meeting, a number of possible options came forward, and these are now being considered by the Cabinet. We meet with Ryde business representatives next week, and I am hoping some positive proposals will come forward at that meeting. Perhaps Councillor Louisiani will forward any ideas she has to that meeting or to Councillor Whittle direct, which gives you an avenue. Finally, can I turn to my councillor colleagues, particularly the members who are not in the Conservative group, and encourage you to come forward with some positive ideas to help with the budget setting process. Unfortunately, to date, only one member opposite, Councillor Lilly, has come forward with some budget suggestions which he has shared with the Cabinet and which are now being considered, and I do thank him for his initiative and innovative approach, and I know Councillor Moss will acknowledge that. Criticism and comment last year that we left insufficient time for people to share their thoughts and ideas came forward. This is clearly not the case now, and I would encourage you all to engage with your residents and come forward with any further ideas we can consider. The framework is clear. We need to save £5.5 million each year for the next 3 years without dipping into our reserves, which are a one-off option. Other than that, we are happy to consider any proposals. Finally, to the wider public, we are planning a Cabinet Meets the Public event early in the new year, at which we will take questions and ideas regarding the budget and any other activities of the Council, and further information on that event will be publicised in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if people can be mindful, we've only got 15 minutes. Councillor Stewart's taken up 3. Councillor Brodie, you are next.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't address the issues regarding the budget. We've still got plenty of time to be feeding into that. I would just like to address the issue that is raised in the petition, which is the proposed parking charges within Ryde. I wish to speak not only as the Isle of Wight member for Newport East, but as Chair of Newport and Carisbrooke Parish Council, which has taken a very clear view of concern regarding the proposed extension of charges across the county town as part of the current options. I would remind every member of this council that 65% of all parking income comes from Newport, and it's time that Newport was treated fairly alongside all the other towns of the Isle of Wight. There are proposals to damage the areas of Newport that astonishingly still haven't got charges, and there's not many of them in the latest proposals, and we do have serious concerns about that. We've supported entirely the views of Newport Business Association, and I'm pleased that you met with them, and I believe Councillor Price was part of that as well. Overall, though, I entirely recognise the issues outlined by Councillor Lucioni from Ryde, and recognise all the people who've signed the petition. I'm sure we could probably do something entirely similar in Newport, but we decided not to do that, given that we're already the milked cow, I think you would call, in terms of parking. I have suggested to you individually that if you'd like to hand all the car parks in Newport to Newport and Carisbrooke Parish Council in the future, I will make them work, I will fill them up, and I will give an option for free parking over a limited period on the streets of Newport, which would help to regenerate this town, which is something Newport and Carisbrooke Parish Council is committed to, and I thought the Isle of Wight Council was. Obviously, by sending a message that you're going to increase parking charges across Newport is making some of us wonder if you're actually speaking the truth to us. I'll conclude there, Chair, but I do welcome this petition, and I welcome Councillor Raxford's proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
I too support, and if it's a proposal I would second it, from Councillor Axford. I am also a Ryde Town councillor, and I'm also the Ryde Town Council's representative on the Ryde Business Association, and I've already been with a meeting of that association, and they are very much part of this petition. We have a lot of small shop owners in Ryde that have a range of specialist shops, and we have a lot of loyalty from Ryde residents to use those traditional shops. The ward I live in, Ryde East, is on top of a hill, right? And it has a large percentage of older residents who actually rely on getting into the town, probably by car, parking on Union Street, quickly going into those shops. And what those residents are saying is if there is charges, they are less likely to make those trips. And those trips could be the make or break of that, because the residents go into the chemist, then they pop into a local cafe, perhaps have a cup of tea, etc. Go and use the toy shops, for instance. Recently, I printed out all my grandchildren's Christmas presents details from Amazon and went into the local toy shops in Ryde, and I got them. And I'm being part of a campaign to encourage people to do the same. You know, perhaps use Amazon for your choice, but that and all the things that were on Amazon for children, things like civilians and things. If you've got grandchildren, you know these things. Were actually being able to bought in for relatively the same price on Ryde, on Union Street, on the High Street. And we've got to actually encourage the people. So this would take away, and it would really seriously affect my residents in our ward who actually don't have irregular buses and actually do have to get in the car for those actual journeys. So I totally support Councillor Axford that you would actually listen, that this could be a make or break of many businesses and affect actual residents who need to be able to have a quick shop and turnaround time. Thank you.
Councillor Whittle.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate what I said at the Ryde Town Council meeting before the petition started and what I said at the Cabinet meeting. This idea was given to me when I was the chairman of the Ryde Business Association. It was given to me by traders in Union Street. Those traders complained about the lack of spaces available for their customers due to the fact that many of the cars that you see daily in Union Street belong to people who work in Union Street, and they're effectively blocking spaces for potential customers. They've asked me for years, Wayne, if you can get near the ear of power, could you make it that Union Street could become one zone? Because at the moment the 4 zones create a loophole. I've also been asked by traders in Union Street, as Councillor Axford says, that on a Sunday you'll notice that we don't have many shops open at all in Ryde, and that's due to 2 reasons. The first is the High Street. All the shops up there are blocked by cars that park up the High Street all day long on a Sunday. And in Union Street, it's free to park there all day. So there's hardly any parking spaces left for customers on a Sunday. Now, I know some might be people who live in Union Street, but that is supposed to be a high street, a functioning high street. So the proposals that I put to the council were to make Union Street one zone for 7 days a week. Now, when the paper come forward, it didn't mention Union Street, it just said parking charges in Ryde, which in my view was incorrect. And I've argued against it ever since. I will continue to argue against it. What we have to realise is that the key employment sector of this island is wholesale and retail, which is closely followed by accommodation and food. And food and retail is what make our towns. So we have to remember that, and we have to preserve that, because that is one of the main employers of this island. And I'll thank you, and I will support Councillor Axford. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Well, thank you, Councillor Whittle. I'm going to support the petitioners, not just Councillor Axford, because I think that is the local voice. That is the voice that we've heard from Councillor Lucionia earlier in the presentation, and that's where we need to lay our loyalty. I welcome that there's already a recommendation tabled that the council reconsider parking fees in Ryde in its budget recommendation to full council. I'm pleased to see that we're also moving along with dialogue before action, talking to the business associations involved. I think that's a way forward. I too have been around long enough to listen to the 4-zone and let's have 1 zone down Union Street parking. We've been around the block quite a few times on that, Councillor Whittle. And it's not just down to ourselves. Other people have voiced it, other people have heard it. If this can start to move things forward so that we do get churn in our town centres, then that's the way it should be. As Councillor Lucionia said, it's not a one-fits-all scenario at all. It needs to be looked at and talked about with local residents, local traders, local independent traders who actually have put their money up and actually gone out and created business. I think that what we need to also look at is that the projections on the budget sheet sometimes are a little bit of a wet finger in the air job, and when you're talking 70 to 80,000 pounds coming in from parking fees, sometimes it doesn't actually ring as true as it looks in black and white. What we need to actually look at is providing some relief for shopkeepers and shop workers, business people, business workers in and around, and quite possibly start to resurrect what we were trying to look at a few years back, which is a permit for these people so that it's affordable, but it also brings in some cash for the council. Because, let's face it, we need cash, but we also need to make sure that those people on minimum wage or working wage actually can afford to purchase something of that ilk, which actually brings me to the Ryde car parks that are half full. And we need to attract people to go into those car parks to park if they're there for 8 hours a day or thereabouts. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to look at. What I'd like to finish up on is that we bring this back to the Cabinet, let them reconsider and let them, as they will do, gain enough information instead of just the budget line that we looked at initially. I think that also, Chair, I would like to ask for a named vote when this comes forward so that we actually can see who's got the interests of our local businesses, our independents in focus. And so I welcome that, and I look for a named vote, but I can do that later, I feel sure. Thank you.
Councillor Barry, you've got about 30 seconds.
Right. I didn't know that there was 4 zones in Union Street. Wayne obviously is known and been a member of the ruling group for about the last 7 years. I'm surprised he didn't bring that in before now. There's 2 issues here. We seem to be muddling it up about zones, when all we want to decide is, should we charge in Union Street or not? I know for a fact that people in my ward next door to it won't come into Ryde and shop, which is Union Street, incidentally, is on a hill, if you don't know it. And you go to Tesco's, you can get everything there, and it's on the flat, and it's free. We've got to do more to protect places like Union Street, and we won't protect anything by charging them.
Okay, as promised, we've debated now for 15 minutes. The recommendation is going to come up on the screen, or the resolution, that the Chamber request the Cabinet reconsider parking fees in Ryde in their budget recommendation to full Council. So you will be voting for or against that. And Councillor Stevens, I understand you wish a named vote. Do you have 3 others that will request for a named vote?
I'll second it.
Oh, blimey. Okay. Did you want to see their names? You don't need to see their names, did you, for a vote? No, okay. Okay, so we move to a name vote. Those in favour, please, that the Chamber requests the Cabinet reconsider parking fees in Ryde in their budget recommendation to full Council, please. All those in favour?
Microphone. Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Andre, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Medland, Councillor Smart, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Wank's gone, Councillor Gallett, Councillor Cameron, and Councillor Stewart.
And those against? Do we have any abstentions?
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Ward. That's it.
Therefore, that vote is carried. Thank you, Karen, for the hard work. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is Chairman's official announcements. I presume there's no questions from that one, so moving on. Leaders' update report. 20 minutes, Councillor Stewart. Oh, 5, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you can offer me 20 minutes.
No, thanks.
So I won't take 20 minutes, Chair. I think the main important points are laid out in the report itself. I'm looking forward to some members' questions on it, and I've had a number indicated to me in other areas. I think there are 2 additions I'd like to make by way of report. Members may or may not be aware that we now have a full Ofsted inspection taking place in our Children's Services Department here at the Isle of Wight Council. If you can recall, the last inspection was the starting point for the engagement we then subsequently took on with Hampshire and our Children's Services. The inspection is due to be announced, the outcome, on Friday the 30th of November, and it will be interesting to see how far we have come along from that time and what the result now is from the Ofsted inspection. Whether that will be publicly known by the 30th November, I don't know, but certainly that's the information I had. But in any event, I think it's good that we're being inspected. I think it's good that they've come in and doing a full inspection, and we will certainly share that with members once the outcome is received. The second thing that I wanted to add to the report was that today I had a meeting with the Managing Director of Visit Isle of Wight, and during that meeting he shared with me a few figures which I think might be of interest to the community. In quarter 3 of this year, which is, if I call it the summer, £139 million was spent on the island, which is up 13% on the same period last year, probably in part due to the weather, but not completely. Secondly, £286 million was spent on the island over the last 12 months, and that is up 1% from the previous year. And we had 51% of visitors who came to the island visiting one or more of our island attractions, be they paid for or free, in that period, and that's up from 45% in the same period last year. So sometimes we do bash ourselves on the back over things that aren't working, but I thought that was a bit of good news. The Managing Director agreed I could share it with you this evening, and I add that to my report. I'm happy to take questions.
Members' questions to the leader? Councillor Lilly.
On your item 21, you talk about the business rate retention pilot. The Chancellor recently in the budget put forward about cutting business rate bills by a third for almost 500,000 small high street shops. We've just been talking about Ryde and obviously in Newport, where actually that would be the case. And also there was talk about a 650 million transition fund for local high streets, and I know that there's 40 million for heritage high streets, which in particular I've already nominated Ryde that would fit into that. How is this going to affect? Sorry.
Please asking questions. Could you not interrupt, Councillor Whitehouse? Councillor Lilly, please ask your question.
How is that, i.e. the discount, as it were, that would go to those small sort of shop owners, which are considerable on the island, affect the business rates that will come in, and how are you going to relate to that?
Okay, so the second part, the offer from the government would be fully funded by the government, and your question is in depth, and I will get you a response that answers that, because I too would like to have the detail. Just referring to the first part, so members may recall that although we as an administration chose not to go down the road of devolution because we didn't think it was right for the island, what we did do is agree to partner with Portsmouth and Southampton in a business rate pilot. At that time, it meant that 100% of the business rates that we all normally send to government didn't go to government. We were able to retain them. But what was particularly attractive to that was that the government underwrote it for the island so that we would be no worse off. The result of that, which was reflected in the budget papers back last February, was that the Isle of Wight gained £2 million that year from that piece of initiative. In fact, we gained more than that because there is a pot of about £4 million, which is seen as what we call the investment pot that we've all got now. And I and the two leaders from Southampton Portsmouth will now be looking at how we use that to grow some more money for us. So I think that was a good decision and it proved its worth. This year, the government have reduced that process, that pilot process, to a 75% of business rates. Nevertheless, even on the lay calculations that we have, we should pick up something in excess of £1 million this year if it goes through. Now that's separate from the points that you then went on to answer. I don't have all the information on the second points, but I will get them for you. So I think at the moment, that's good news for us here on the island. We made a good call, and that's bringing money in, which for me is what it's all about. I'd far rather see income generated than cuts that we don't really want to do.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stewart, in your report, particularly the introduction, you refer to the financial position of the Isle of Wight Council, and you've already alluded to the level of further cuts that you're anticipating making over the next 3 years. This despite the fact that you are building up a pre-election war chest in reserves currently of £11 million, when any Section 151 officer will tell you that 5 to 6 million would be more than adequate to cover any contingencies. Since our last full council in September, because they're not very frequent these days, the failing and wounded Prime Minister of this country has announced that austerity is over. Can you perhaps explain to me and the people of the Isle of Wight when the representations you claim to have been making since you came into office, along with the island's Conservative MPs, are going to start bearing fruit in terms of the defence and the restoration of the public services that have been slaughtered by this government and its coalition predecessor over the last 8.5 years? Thank you.
Well, Councillor Bodie, thank you for your very comprehensive question, and far be it for me to want to be overly political. The good news on this is that we are pleased with the way in which we have presented the island case to the government. As you know, we have done some work evidence-based with Portsmouth University to justify our claim for £6.4 million, which we believe is the disadvantage that this island has by being an island compared with elsewhere in the country. I do know, because I spoke to the Minister myself, that he has accepted the principle. I do know that the government have gone to Portsmouth University to verify the principle, and I am, let's say, led to believe that the government are now applying a very sympathetic consideration to what has been established. I also know that our MP, Bob Seeley, has particularly and personally taken that battle to government. Now, I'm one of these that believes you accept the money once it's in the bank, so I'm a cautious person, and this whole budget process that we are dealing with this year is predicated on the fact that we may or may not get that money, because if we just relied on that and didn't, that wouldn't be good housekeeping. I probably would have to disagree with you over the reserve levels and your description of them. What we have found and what we do know from some very current issues is that we must have a sound reserve base, and frankly 5 million is not a sound reserve base in our view, so we'd have to just disagree on that, I think. The third element, which is the funding review, which is when the whole of the pot allocated to local authorities comes up, is the time at which I would expect, if the government are of their word, to see some change, particularly for us, because we are one of those rural areas who are, in my view, justified in the debate that is now happening that London has been the centre and everywhere else seems to have been less considered. What I think I heard the Chancellor of the Exchequer say is austerity is over, subject to the Brexit vote, because I'm not expecting all your Labour colleagues to vote for the deal that's on the table. So we'll see what happens. That's one of these things I can't influence, even here on the Isle of Wight. We know that 60-odd% of the Isle of Wight people voted for Brexit, and our MP has very much supported that. So I think politically we're in the right side of that. Reality, let's hope you and I can have a conversation next year when I can say to you, a bit like the ducks haven't flown for the investment, we actually got a few ducks in the air.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to item 8. The Adult Social Care Directorate has been shortlisted for the Local Government Chronicle Awards, and much has been made of this. Now, the submission for these awards, as I understand it, had to be in September. In September, a video went out which was very widespread, praising the local area coordinators. Please can I have confirmation as to whether the huge success of the local area coordinators was actually included in the submission for this award? And if so, are the organisers of this award going to be made aware that this has now been withdrawn? Thank you.
Well, of course, you have probably worked out that if the award is for adult social care, it won't necessarily be for the local area coordinator work, because as we're told, the local area coordination work sits outside of the adult social care, which, as you know, every member of the public who's an adult on this island can have a needs-based assessment by the adult social care team. So the answer to your question is no, it wasn't as an immediate part of that. The second part of your question is about the awards, or the depth of the awards, and I think it's a credit to this island that our adult social care team can itself be selected for such an award, and add to that that Councillor Mosdell, who has tirelessly, and I have to say tirelessly, fought for the case of all those in the vulnerable area that she leads the membership on, has herself been nominated for a national award. So all I will answer in summary to that is, I think the award is well justified. I congratulate every member of staff in the adult social care team who must take credit for it, and the local area coordinators will be dealt with in the way we've previously described.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman.
Leader, I was just wondering if you had any comments to make regarding item 20, the proposals for the combined fire service, given the news we had yesterday that the shared service agreement between the three police forces, Avon, Somerset and Gloucestershire, is now fallen apart. Just wondering are there lessons to be learned from that as we go forward?
So there's two things to talk about, I think, on the Police Fire Authority. Just to remind members, there are a number of options. The Police and Crime Commissioner has legally been empowered, should he wish to do so, to take over our fire service along with all the others. The only county that I'm aware of that have actively done that is Essex, and there's a lot of learning to come from the results in Essex. We've taken the view, and certainly that's out to consultation at the moment, that the future for our fire service sits with the newly formed, or will be newly formed, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authority, which will be similar to the type of service we get from the police, where we have the Chief Constable of Hampshire covering Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and an independent body so dealing. So I think that's the right route to go. I know our Police and Crime Commissioner is comfortable with that. Our representative on the board of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police and Fire Authority, if it's approved, will be our Cabinet member, and we look forward to that coming to fruition, and I think the details of that will come forward in January.
Councillor Stevens, we've only got 3 minutes. Councillor Garrett, did you wish to speak? Ask a question? Well, we've got 3 minutes, so if you can be quick, please. Thank you.
I'm speaking as quickly as I can. Paragraph 11 of your report, Leader. The Council's early help team is currently recruiting a range of volunteers to help provide support to island children and families, in addition to our statutory functions. That smacks to me of replacing the local area coordinators with something, and I wondered if you could elaborate on that. And is there any cost attached to it at all? As we're supposedly looking at saving with the lax departure, what is going to be the total outlay for a new replacement in certain areas of service? Thank you.
Well, I don't have those figures in front of me, and I haven't been advance notice of that. If you want the actual facts and figures, I'll make sure you get a written reply. But I'll just defer to Councillor Mosdell to deal with your general comment, which I think is she'll be able to handle without any problem. Sorry, I should have said Children's Services, so I can now comfortably go over to Councillor Brading.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Stevens. These are recruitment we were doing anyway. It's nothing to do with the LAC review at all. We looked at the service at the start of the year, and there's a couple of areas we needed to put a bit of focus on. One was around return from missing interviews that we had a bit of an issue with, and the second one was around doing some mentoring through our young offenders team. So we were taking on extra staff to strengthen those areas. And the final thing was about the whole home start policy of the family support. So I haven't got the figures for the extra what it costs us to do so, but it's just strengthening 3 key areas where we've identified there was a weakness. Nothing to do with the current Ofsted, nothing to do with the LAC review, the budget process. This was ongoing strengthening of the children's services teams.
Councillor Garrett, final question.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 9 refers to meetings had with the then Minister of State for Health about cross-sale patient travel. Of course, that then Minister has gone on to bigger, if not necessarily better, things at the Department for exiting the European Union. Can the Leader outline for me what steps have been taken to make sure any of the good work that has come through those consultations and discussions is not lost, as it can happen when there is a change of personnel at the top of a department or part of a department?
In brief response, yes, I can. The MP and I have been in communication over this very issue. I'm aware that he has now met with the new Health Secretary, and those activities continue at a pace. I am hoping, I say hoping this stage because I can't give you a confirmation, that there will be some positive news if the government are able to follow through on what they do, subject, of course, to Councillor Brodie's rightly pointing out there's rather a few other things going on at government at the moment.
Okay, that's the 20 minutes up, so that's the end of that. If we move on to item number 7, which is the Local Council Tax Support Scheme, Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chairman.
This report is before the council because every year statutorily we are required to review the council tax support scheme. Councillors will remember that this scheme has been reduced in the past. Originally it was 100% and it was fully funded by government. Government support has been withering rapidly and the previous administration reduced it to 80% and the current administration further reduced it to 70%. I'm pleased to say that there are no proposals for any further reduction, and I have to say that as the councillor responsible for making sure we balance the budget and find the 16.5 million that we have to, taking a saving of over £300,000 was terribly tempting. But we are not going to do that. We shall continue to offer council tax support. It costs this council about £10 million a year to do that, and we are still funding £7 in every 10. We still have the hardship fund, and as you'll see in the report, we've made quite a number of awards from that fund, which is ongoing. So essentially, what we're saying is no change, no reduction. That is set out in the recommendation in paragraph 43, and I hope Council will support that. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that proposed and seconded, please? Seconded, thank you. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. If I may move an amendment to this proposal. And I believe it's on the screen there, but I will read it out for the benefit of all. It is to consult on amending the current local council tax scheme to allow for a maximum level of support for working age cases to be increased to 80%, but allowing for any minor adjustments to applicable amounts and non-dependent charges in line with housing benefit and council tax reduction scheme for pension age applicants. I do this because I'm mindful of the vote that I was part of in January this year. At the start of our proceedings, Veronica Brown spoke of the poor in our community. The strategic context, as outlined in this paper, references vulnerable people. There is no doubt that if you need support to pay your council tax, you fall into one of those groups. And so I felt that having taken a stand and saying I could not support a drop from 80 to 70, that it would be only right for me to pursue again the potential for restoring this to at least 80%. I've taken advice from the Section 151 officer, who was enormously helpful and made some, as you can imagine, always bet with Chris Ward, some challenging comments, but said that he recognised that I would have the integrity if this were to pass and to go through of bringing forward a balanced budget, as we did as a Liberal Democrat group earlier this year in the form of an amendment. And the monitoring officer has provided me with the assurance that this, if it were passed, could go through in order to allow us to pass a budget in the appropriate timescale. Integrity is a powerful principle, and I took that very clearly from the monitoring officer's comments to me. And I will reiterate, I voted against the drop from 80% to 70%, and the arguments then are the arguments now. And they are the arguments of this paper when it discusses a drop, thankfully not being taken forward, to 65%. It is twofold. It hurts people. Now, the people who come forward and access the hardship fund are at the very worst end of these things. And the numbers that I was given in October show that, thankfully, whilst it is small numbers, those numbers are increasing. Small sums of money make big differences to people who suffer in poverty. And a restoration in these terms would help them. It is a sum of money not dissimilar from that which the council sanctioned in order to have beef up its senior management team. Sometimes you invest to save. In that case, it was to invest in delivering the council's priorities through its management structure. Here I am asking that we consult on investing to save people from the most dire of circumstances that they can find, that there is nothing at the bottom of the barrel. They have scraped it. There are no more pennies. They have to go to hardship funds. They have to go to food banks. I ask it in your heart that I am not asking you to make a decision to restore it, but make that decision to consult upon it. And if it were to pass, I would endeavour to do my best to work with the leader to provide as many opportunities to find the funds that would support this and ensure a balanced budget. I look for your support.
I'll second it.
Councillor Fuller, are you speaking to the amendment? Thank you.
I'm in absolute support of Andrew's proposal for further consultation. This morning, coincidentally, I spent my time with other councillors in Cowes going around one of the food banks, talking to some of the volunteers, talking to the residents, and finding out from residents the impact and of the universal credits are having upon people. One of the concerns that I have is that this amount of money is impacting upon ordinary working families on very, very low incomes, which we have many of on the island. And I think those people within our society are people that are perhaps sometimes overlooked. And I would like to support Andrew's proposal and think that we should be doing more to support these residents. And I think to revert back to the 80%, it's not as good as the over 65s get, but it's a step in the right direction. I think we have to do more for working families, more people working, trying to get people off benefits and actually getting them to work for their money rather than being unemployed and receiving money that way. I'm total in support of it, and thank you for bringing it forward, Andrew. I'm totally in line with what you're saying. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
I'm in support of the amendment. In my ward, I have Ryde Food Bank. On a weekly basis, I do go and actually talk to people within that food bank. They are in debt. A lot of people are actually owe actual council tax. And in fact, if you look at the sort of figures of the amount of money costing for debt collection to actually get that money back of things, there is a clear research link between mental health problems, anxiety and depression, and debt. If we actually look at helping debt, and I'm saying this because I've already put a proposal to Councillor Stewart, and that from Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Community Fund, which is actually looking at a progressive way of actually helping people who are in debt, who are in crisis, to able to cope with that and to actually manage it. And actually, that would save the money. So I'm not saying, I'm not supporting this and taking out reserves. I'm saying that I've already put to you an actual proposal that could actually help people. That you actually combined helping people with that debt, with their mental health, with their self-esteem, with getting work, and putting that in place. So, because we were announced by your leader, by the Conservative Prime Minister of this country, that austerity has ended, I think by actually increasing this support back to 80% actually gives a message that we as a council actually want to work with people to improve their lives and get them out of poverty. I'm going to be talking about emotion, about reality of poverty tonight, how it really affects people, and it affects the children and generations. So I do urge you to actually consider this amendment, because we can look at other ways through social investment bonds, and other ways to get that money in, but this money goes back into people's pocket, and actually it reduces their debt, because a lot of them will end up in debt because they won't be able to pay for it.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm speaking to the amendment, not the substantive at the moment, because I know we haven't voted on the amendment. So this current position is one that we set in the last budget and is part of the last budget arrangements and sits inside our medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Hutchinson, I'm no doubt when he ultimately sums up, will refer you back to the hardship fund. And sometimes when people are speaking, I can hear them conflating, perhaps deliberately or perhaps unintentionally, one piece of dilemma with another to make the case. We are not undermining the hardship fund. We do have to set a lawful budget. We've listened this evening, quite rightly, to appeals from the public in Ryde, and I can tell you we had the similar from the people in Newport about not reducing and not introducing parking charges. We will have other debates. At the end of the day, it is the responsibility and duty of this council to set a lawful and balanced budget that is financially sustainable. The previous administration left the job because they said it couldn't be done. That's what they said. Well, we're doing it. And it's painful, and I would prefer to put that 80% figure up to 100%. But I know that under the current financial climate, we have to all live within our means. Can you deal with that, Jan?
Could you please be quiet up in the gallery? I know it's emotive, but we really need to get on. Thank you.
So I won't support the amendment because we have a strategy for financial management of the council, and we will follow the strategy through. I do have a lot of empathy, however, with comments by Councillor Lilly, and I think he has introduced some proposals which we will be considering, and I thank him for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to support the amendment put forward by Councillor Garrett, someone who I know does due diligence, and having spoken to the 151 officer and our monitoring officer, I'm very happy with his proposal. It's very sound and sensible. You know, I volunteered at Newport Food Bank. I have done for the last 7 years, and the stories you hear, it is from the working poor. These are the strivers. These are people who want to change their situation. And, you know, the housing debacle of the last 15, 20 years, and the fact that, you know, we only built, 36 houses last year, Councillor Hutchinson, 36 affordable homes on the island last year, you know, is absolutely shocking. So being trapped in paying for highly expensive private rentals and not being able to get into some decent affordable housing is part of this problem. I know it's something we're trying to fix, but it's paying, you know, can we pay catch up? We're not going to get these homes that we need within the next year. So I think what I would like is to support the amendment and look at this as maybe a year where we can pay catch up and get some houses built. Thank you.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's pretty generally known that my ward has the largest areas of social deprivation on the Isle of Wight. And that's been recognised by successive administrations in my 14 years as a councillor. Efforts have been made to address that have singularly failed over a period of time. And often I see the contradiction in policy of administrations, and I'd like to highlight where the contradiction is with this administration, because once again we have a health and wellbeing board promoted project within my ward to start to address social deprivation issues yet again. I welcome that. I'm fully prepared to engage with it, etc. But then you set that against some of the policies that are driven by this administration and the government it supports. We've all referred to food banks. The food bank in Newport is on the edge of my ward. I visit on a regular basis. I understand the difficulties that people, both in my ward and other deprived parts of Newport, are in. We have a superb local area coordinator operating on the east side of Newport, covers Councillor Price's ward as well, a superb lad who will be out of work at the end of March, or certainly out of that sort of work, unless something drastic happens. And this, and frankly, you know, I've been around long enough to have seen the reduction from 100% year on year on year. The hardship fund that exists is something I squeezed out of the independent administration a few years ago. I still voted against the reduction. I think I went down to 80% at that point. I've consistently voted against it, and I voted against the reduction last year. As Councillor Garrett alludes to, when you're scraping the barrel, there's nothing else to scrape. And I don't know how I, you know, in my 14th year, can continue to say to those of my residents who live at the tough end of life that this council is serious about projects to address deprivation issues when it constantly hammers them, those good things that happen, like local area coordinators, like trying to provide some relief when it comes to council tax payments, like all the other things that are listed in that horrific appendix of cuts for next year to add on to last year's horrific appendix of cuts. And again, I just say, you know, and you know, I'm not looking for a chair here, frankly. I just wonder that how can the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of this country seriously say austerity is over when their representatives on earth of the Isle of Wight continue to deliver the austerity that they should be ashamed of. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stevens.
I think the applause was for Councillor Lumley. I'm just going to leave him behind the applause now, so thank you very much indeed. Briefly, yes, the independent administration, which I was part of, brought it down to 80%. To me, that was as far as we should have taken it, and it was the benchmark, really. I support the amendment basically because it's fair and it will alleviate some of the concerns and problems that are felt on this island, and indeed the financial pressures. One thing I will say is that just to clarify the situation with regard to the leader months on months, or not every month because we miss a few, we don't have so many meetings now, but he does refer back to the Island Independent Administration walking away. I sat over there virtually where Councillor Mosdell was and put myself forward for the Isle of Wight Council leadership. We didn't walk away, we stayed there, and Councillor Stewart at the time, with a cabal from others around the chamber, actually seized the moment, and this is a point of information for you, Councillor Whitehouse. You weren't here at the time, no doubt. So just to clarify the situation, the Island Independents didn't walk away from the administration. What they were doing at the time was showing their distaste for the budget which you passed that year. We put forward, as you know, at that time, an alternative budget. So I'm going to leave it at that, but I support this wholeheartedly. 80% is as low as we should go. Nice to see you, Councillor Whitehouse.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. There's very little that I can actually add to this debate now because most of it's been said. I am fully supportive of this amendment. We need to take a more holistic approach. If you are squeezing people that are already really struggling to manage, then the implications, it will cost more. It's a false economy. It will cost more because the implications, they will need more and more services. So I'm fully in support of this amendment, and I thank Councillor Garrett for putting it forward. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Madam Chairman, I've been uncharacteristically quiet and reticent to comment this evening, but I find myself goaded and prodded into responding to the ignorant and ill-informed remarks from Councillor Stevens. It is a matter of fact that early one Monday morning, the leader and deputy leader of the failed former independent administration resigned their positions and fled the deck of the liner that they'd pointed straight towards the rocks. Councillor Stewart and a number of cross-party colleagues came to the rescue, put together a competent administration that saved this council from financial collapse and were rewarded for that in the election. Now, Madam Chairman, turning to the amendment, this is a cheap political stunt being laden onto the backs of the poorest people of this island. If this was a serious attempt at an amendment, then why didn't Councillor Garrett have the common courtesy and common sense to circulate it to all members in advance so that they could consider it and take advice on it? No, he wants to play games with the poverty-stricken people on the island, those in the hardest and most difficult positions, and I will have no part of it. We could not possibly support this amendment without discussion with our finance officer about its implications. And I'm afraid him just passing on the remark that the finance officer was happy with it is not good enough. It is no substitute for common sense, and it is no substitute for common courtesy.
As I have been named,
sorry,
if I might respond to
Councillor Garrett, you're not actually permitted to come back.
I have been personal explanation. He has made comments about me, if I may. The courtesy, certainly, if I could have brought this before, it is a matter of fact that I didn't have the words completely worked out until just a few minutes, maybe an hour beforehand. I know you may struggle to comprehend the thing, but that is how it was.
Councillor Barry, you seconded the motion. Do you wish to speak? Sorry, the amendment.
No, I might say something I regret, and we're on telly, aren't we?
Okay, Councillor Hutchinson, then you have the right to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm getting a bit of a feeling of déjà vu because we had exactly this debate when we chose to make the reduction from 80 to 70%. We put in place then, because we did not know precisely the effect it would have on the poorest people, we put in place a hardship fund which at the time was set at 250,000, but I said if necessary that would actually be unlimited. Officers were instructed to view all claims as sympathetically as they were able, and the hardship fund has only had to issue £24,000 worth of support. That suggests to me that the incidents that members opposite are relating to are not as frequent as anyone would think. We are still putting in £10 million of taxpayers' money into this fund. In addition to that, this council also administers another £50 million in support for the poorest people on this island, a total of £60 million. Over the next 3 years, we have no choice, whatever the Prime Minister says about austerity, we have no choice but to find an additional £16.5 million. That is 20% on top of the 76 million that we have found. So whilst members opposite might like to have the luxury of saying, well, let's put it all back to where it was, you will find actually the decisions that we will have to take, not through our choice, but we have to follow what government says, and every council of whatever political persuasion has to do that. We have got to find the savings that we know we need to make. And this, I'm delighted to say, we are not making further savings on this particular budget, but I will not support reinstating it when there's no need to.
Okay, we're now moving to the vote on the...
Be a named vote, please.
before? Okay. This is going to be a named vote on the proposed amendment as seen on the screen. All those in favour of supporting this amendment, please show.
Councillor Andre, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Medland, Councillor Smart, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett.
And those against?
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Axford.
Sorry, we can't hear. Can you please be quiet while we're taking the vote and the names? Thank you.
Do you want me to start again,
Yeah,
Jen?
start again, yeah.
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Axford, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Cameron and Councillor Stewart.
Are there any abstentions?
No.
None. That motion fails. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
We just read the, sorry, it's the amendment, we just wait for the numbers to read them out.
You need to, oh, right, okay.
Because of what we're broadcasting.
Okay. So that's 22 against and 11 for. Thank you. So are there any members wishing to speak to the substantive motion? So we move to the vote then, please. All those in favour of this substantive motion, please show.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
And those against, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
That motion is carried. Okay, so moving on to item number 8, which is motions submitted under Procedure Rule 9 of the Council's Constitution. Councillor Whitehouse, you're first on, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a motion on the order paper, which is a riveting read, to move that this council notes the impact upon the island of the Local Government Act 2000. I picked this motion very, very carefully because that piece of legislation goes to the heart of the very existence of this council. It is that legislation which requires the council to have and to implement and to keep up to date a constitution. It is therefore that document, the constitution, through that act of parliament, that gives the council the legal status that it has and places upon it statutory obligations to fulfil certain duties in certain ways and to be accountable for the way it uses public resources. For those of you who are of a certain age, of course, you will remember that 2000 was a period of a different government. So it was not a Conservative government that put it into place, and yet it transformed and reinvigorated the way in which local government fulfills its function all around the country. Because it was this legislation which, inter alia, gave powers to local authorities to actually promote economic, social and environment well-being within their boundaries. Prior to that legislation, that was not a function of local government. It also required local authorities to shift from the traditional inadequate committee-based system of decision-making, which in so many local authorities around the country had suffocated the life out of local government and really tied its hands, preventing it from doing much of that which it wanted to do to improve the quality of life of local residents and to defend them in the public space. It also introduced a new ethical framework for councillors and the way in which they conduct their behaviour, including a new standards board and an adjudication panel. And as I said in my opening remarks, it requires the authority to maintain in the public domain a readily accessible constitution. What this authority does, and in particular to the way debates are conducted in this chamber. It has to be supplemented, of course, by common courtesy and common sense if it's going to work, but it is the Constitution itself which is everything for this council. I just wanted to highlight today that our Constitution is in need of reform. It is inadequate and unfit for purpose. It doesn't properly defend the rights of individual members. It tips the balance, in my view, too far in favour of officers and undermines some of the democratic freedom of members to do what they would like to do in their chamber. So I've brought this forward today to serve a marker on that, and I believe that I'm going to say very little more at this stage because I believe the leader wants to say something.
Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second it. I'll second it. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Far be it to me, or in sometimes anybody in this chamber, to challenge your articulate, knowledgeable manner of sharing this in-depth conversation with us. However, I'm going to propose that we defer this particular motion. I'll look for a seconder shortly. In order that we can give it the due consideration that it deserves and deal with it in January. I think you do make a very valid point, or a number of very valid points, and with your support I will seek a deferment so that we can tackle the important issues that you raised, but in a timely fashion next year. And I look for a seconder on that.
Seconder to defer.
Councillor Stevens, that may be the only time we agree tonight, and thank you for that.
Councillor Whitehouse, are you happy to accept the deferral?
I am happy to accept the deferral, although, Chair, if I might make one observation about our Constitution, it does provide for the gallery to be cleared if we have protesters disturbing our proceedings, and that's long overdue.
Right. Moving on, Councillor Whitehouse, you're back on again. Oh no, do we have to vote on the deferral?
I don't know.
We don't, because you've accepted it, haven't you? Okay, right, Councillor Whitehouse, you're back on again then.
If the leader could turn his microphone off. Thank you. I forget which hat I'm wearing at the moment, but I do have, as you say, another motion on the order paper to move that this council commits to regenerating the area of Newport Harbor to the benefit of all residents of Newport and the island as a whole. This is something that the leader has very much set as his strategic vision for the future of his administration. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to look at some semi-derelict, in some places, sites, some good sites as well, and the monstrosity that is this building, which is an assault on everybody's eyes as they approach it. So ugly is it, occupying, as it does though, such valuable space in the centre of our county town. Councillor Whittle, I'm sure will want to say more about the details, but he and Councillor Stewart in particular are working with the regeneration team to find ways to create jobs, affordable accommodation, and training and education facilities in Newport. We're looking to turn the whole of the Medina Valley into an economic regeneration zone to create thousands of high-quality new jobs and wealth for the island. That vision will no doubt have to include, in my personal view, a new crossing of the River Medina, possibly in the Stag Lane sort of area. I think everybody on the island would benefit from that because all roads seem to lead to Coppins Bridge, where there is a continual jam, and anything that stops traffic coming into central Newport, part Chair Councillor Jones-Evans and her wish to get lots of people in the shops, but everybody would benefit from less traffic in Newport. We have secured the services of, and I'm just rummaging around for making sure I have the right piece of paper, the services of the architecture firm K. Elliott. That means that the process to bring forward the regeneration of Newport Harbor has taken a major step forward with that appointment. They are going to be developing the master plan. Their specific proposals are asked to balance the attraction of market interest, retaining harbour heritage and character, and enhancing Newport as a whole. And that report, an initial stage in this process, should be made available to members in spring 2019. We want to move this project forward with momentum because it can make a big change to the quality of lives of many people. It can help us achieve our strategic objectives of making sure that we attract, retain, and motivate business people, the best teachers, the best social workers, and even the best councillors. It's part of that vision that the Conservatives set out in the run-up to the last election, and for which they were rewarded by control of the council. It has got the support of the people of the island as a broad brush visionary approach. What we now have to do is to work out the detail and to make sure that everyone's a winner as Newport and the Medina Valley are regenerated. Oh, yeah.
For a seconder for that, please.
Yeah, can I speak?
Okay, I've got a lot of people that wish to speak, so Councillor Stevens is first.
Thank you. I think we're a few months ahead of time with this. We all agree with the broad brush remarks of Councillor Councillor Whitehouse, sorry, and Councillor Whittle. Obviously, he's going to speak in the same vein. But what I'd like to say is that we've got a regeneration team. We've got a cabinet member involved in the regeneration aspects of this island. Would it not be better to move on to the next business and leave this until we actually get some report in draft format that we can discuss? I think that this is once again a shame from Councillor Whitehouse that he's gone on a three-liner to expand into just an oral refrain of what we're doing in regeneration. I don't think this is going to add value to us this evening whatsoever, so I'd say move to the next business. Thank you.
Should I just say the reason I'm seconding this, all this has been covered by the leader. Doesn't he trust the leader to deliver on what he's saying here? Can't see it.
We've got a proposal and a second as we move to the next business. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And all those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
Okay. So that is now, sorry, are we reading it out? Okay. 23 against, 8 in favour, so that fails. So I'm going to continue with my original list, which is Councillor Price, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, why is this important enough for us to discuss tonight? Well, it's probably the most significant chance of real regeneration for the island, and most importantly for Newport. I support this motion, but of course regeneration of the harbour must be got right. Ensuring regeneration of the harbour works for the existing town and local businesses, and the gateway between the two will be absolutely critical on this. The harbour is the potential jewel in the crown for regeneration of the island. Regeneration must first of all respect the local area, respecting and enhancing the heritage assets in and around the harbour, ensuring Newport Harbor becomes the destination Newport and the island economy absolutely deserves. Thank you.
Next one, Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, this topic has been on our desk for the past 2 years since the Inner Circle report identified this as an important Isle of Wight Council asset for regeneration. And just over a year ago, I instigated with the support of the regeneration team, and I also brought in partners, Newport Parish Council, which is now Newport and Carrollsbrook Parish Council, and Newport Business Association, in bringing forward the Shaping Newport Place plan, which is now in place and has a very good steering committee. So we were all very early on, we realised how important it was for the harbour to be part of Newport, not to be some disconnect, some big fancy showcase of retail and bars and, you know, fancy boats, but had to be really part of the town and really integrated with it. And having met with the master planners twice now, I really feel they understand that and are looking not just at the harbour and the environs around that in Newport, but going out and actually understanding how Newport works. It's really important. You can't have, as Councillor Hastings once said to me, you can't have Newport without the port. Thank you.
Councillor Ian Ward is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support this motion. Living in Sandown, I support regeneration very strongly, and things are moving forward in Sandown. But I do feel that we as a council could do more. We could strengthen our rules or enforce our rules in terms of compulsory purchase and measures like that. I've had discussions with our empty homes officer, and while we have had some successes in compulsory purchase, we feel that actually to a large extent our hands are tied because we don't enforce the rules strongly enough. So while I do support the Newport Harbor regeneration project, I think it will be brilliant for the island if that happens. But I think, you know, I ask that we look across the board as well and just look wider. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Stewart, are you all right up there? Are you okay? Gosh. Okay. Councillor Dave Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members I think this is going to be a very supported motion. I see Newport Harbor, as leader of this council, as our #1 regeneration priority. We've put a lot of effort, and I thank those, both the officers and the members and the community actually, who are supporting this. And if we could do nothing else over the next 2.5 years to get common support on making our market town the #1 place to live in and visit, has got to be a priority. I would love to see this delivered at place. Frankly, I'd love to see it going up tomorrow morning, but I'm learning the lesson as some of the more experienced people say things don't always move as fast as you would like, and therefore I have to say we have to manage expectation. But I can absolutely assure you and anybody else our #1 priority. Interestingly, I was thinking about the comment by Councillor Brodie earlier. You know, 66% of the parking charge income comes from Newport. Well, there's no surprise because this is the main place people come to. It's quite clear that. Councillor Whitehouse loosely mentioned our aspirations around Newport. We have a Garden Island project linked to Camp Hill, which is moving very fast at the moment and looks like it might come forward a lot quicker than we expected, and I'll thank the MP for the work I know he's doing. People are overtly hidden, but I don't really. I'm absolutely keen to see a Medina Bridge because I think that will do a number of things. It will alleviate It will alleviate some of the pressure on Newport Town. It will give good connectivity between East and West Cowes, and it will give us a chance to really showcase what we need to do, and there will be a piece of work coming forward on that. But I think the most important thing we need to understand is if we don't get it right, and I agree with, I love Julie's phrase about that, don't forget Newport's a port, keep the water in, because I don't want to look at the mud. If we don't get this right, then we are at serious risk of undermining the future of Newport. I think this is, as Matthew's absolutely summed it up, this is a real opportunity. And all I would ask all members in this chamber, when areas around this come up at this chamber, let's try and work together on this, because we will all benefit. It's not a political issue in my view. We are leading the drive at the moment, but this will take a number of years, and we should work together on this one. I know the Newport councillors do, I know the Newport Business Association does, and all I would look for is good, genuine support.
Right, I have a rather a long list, so if you could keep it shorter than that would be fabulous. Councillor Mosdale.
Mine's very short. I think that we definitely can support this cross-chamber, and I want to give credit to Julia Baker-Smith when she was the exec member for Regen, and I know she worked really, really hard on it. I know she can't be here this evening, so I'll speak for her and just say, well done, Julia, and we should all support this.
Councillor Brodie.
Very quickly, Chair, this is one of those motions we have which motherhood and apple pie, isn't it, really? We're not going to disagree with, at least I hope not, and I'll be watching. You know, as a Newport member, I don't cover the harbour area, but I walk or cycle it every day of my life. And it's always seemed to me, not only that the harbour desperately needs regenerating, so does the town. In my loft, I have at least 2 other master plans from the harbour, one during Councillor Smart's tenure as a leader of this council, none of which came to fruition. I would remind this council that a regeneration team was set up at the persuasion of the Chief Executive about just over 18 months ago with a 3-year time frame. That 3 years has taken away very fast, and I'm expecting to see some real progress in the next 18 months rather than another dusty document that never gets acted upon. The town that I've made my home for half of my life desperately needs investment. Newport and Carisbrooke Parish Council is putting plans out of its minimalist budget compared to this council's to put serious money in next year. I will be looking to the Isle of Wight Council's capital budget for next year to be putting similar money into the county town as well as into the harbour. The messages I've been receiving so far aren't that positive. I hope they're going to change in the next few weeks. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobart.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to mention perhaps a less exciting side of the Newport Harbor regeneration is the fact that we have before us, we have formed a harbour board to manage the harbour. Also, we have a harbour revision order currently with the Marine Management Organisation to put some rules into place. A less colourful side of it, but I think a vitally important to get this the regeneration managed properly when we get it in place.
So Lily?
I mean, I support this, but I particularly wanted to come in on Councillor Ward's comments. We, the council, should use section 215 far more of the Town and Country Planning Act, because that actually enforces a number of landowners and property owners who just let their properties rot and are actually eyesores. And we should have that. I have 2, right, that are linked to the Pennyfeathers estate that are 2 crumbling, that are actually the entrance to Ryde. So you come into Ryde and you see these crumbling houses. We need to use our powers more, section 215, and also, as Councillor Ward said, the compulsory purchase, where we have places like Vectors Hall in Ryde and a number of properties, I'm sure, around the harbour, which basically owners of those properties have just been absolutely shamefully letting them just rack to ruin. We should be buying them, getting them back into use, and we should be using them to help our homeless and actually reduce sort of housing. If we brought a lot of those derelict properties back, we could actually start helping our actual homeless in this time. So I thank Councillor Ward for actually raising that.
Councillor Howe, and then we're ending up with Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a simple question. Tonight we've heard a councillor telling us that he'd like to put bridges across the Medina and keep the people out of Newport. And then the next one we're talking about how to get more people into Newport. So I would like the ruling group to actually get together and try and decide what they'd like to do and put forward a policy that would actually combine everything together so we'd actually all understand where we're going, because it can't be keep putting different policies together with opposite views. Thank you, Chair.
You were going to be the final one, Councillor Smart, but Councillor Hastings, so Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, as a Newportonian, I have sat in various guises, starting with Medina Borough Council, actually. Well, I suppose I could go back to Newport Borough Council, although I was not a member of it. We have discussed for 30, 35 years what we can do with our lovely, beautiful harbour. Yes, it wants regenerating, and for that I would absolutely agree with this motion, but it is still a beautiful part of the island, which I know, so that is why I agree so much with the present leader of the council, who said we must get this right, and we really must. But at last, I think it's going to happen. Thank you.
Councillor Hastings.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to add my voice to this as well, because when I first became a parish councillor in Newport, and Councillor Julie Jones-Evans referenced it earlier, I did say to her that most towns in the UK would give their right arm to have some water coming right into the town. Therefore, we should target the harbour straight away, get on with it and just do the job. And that goes for the rest of the town as well. But if you've got water there, use it. So I support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehouse, you have the right to sum up, please.
I would thank all those members who have supported this groundbreaking motion. Councillor Whittle appears to have forgotten to put his hand up.
I did put my hand up and nobody listened to me.
Well, too late now. So we are moving on. There is great consensus that this should happen. And I do hear what my good friend, Councillor Howe, said about a superficial contradiction in policies. But I can assure him that a bridge over the River Medina down by Stag Lane would contribute to more people coming into Newport to enjoy its leisure and retail opportunities and the cinemas and other things as well. It's a case of managing that traffic in a much better way than we do at the moment. So I'm delighted by the support, the unanimity, the consensus that I brought to this chamber, as usual. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm moving to the vote. All those in favour, please. Are there anyone against, please? Any abstentions? That's 35 in favour. Thank you very much. Right, moving on, Councillor Michael Livy.
Thank you, Chair. I, as a 61-year-old man, am going to try to attempt to speak a subject that my father, grandfather and his father, all veterans of 2 world wars, would have never spoken about. And as a boy that went to an all-boys school, something I never heard mentioned growing up. I feel in 2018 and the centenary of women's suffrage, I should, as a man, get up and speak about period or menstrual poverty and not be in denial that it exists or that it has nothing to do with me as a man. Equality in a progressive society is about all genders recognising the realities of the other. The realities of poverty on the Isle of Wight can be evidenced in many ways by visiting food banks such as Wight Food Bank in my ward and see families collect basic foods to survive that week, visit citizens' advice drop-ins that are now within our building and hear the stories of families in extensive debt and having to pay so much in payments that the food bank is their only way to eat, to live. Or visit the safe haven where people to go in the evenings who cannot cope anymore and just want to die. And then there is period poverty, which I have to be honest, until a real gallant group of courageous island women, volunteers, set up the Isle of Wight Red Box project, and red means blood, not politics, and contacted me, I had not realised that such an issue. I was embarrassed that I didn't know. The fact is, 1 in 10 girls aged 14 to 21 cannot afford menstrual products. 2, half of all schoolgirls miss a full day of school because of their period. 3, schoolgirls are reporting using socks instead of sanitary towels. The report by the charity Plan International UK, which surveyed 1,000 girls and found 49% of girls missed a whole day of school because of having their period, with 68 admitting that they couldn't concentrate in class with the worry of not having access to the toilet or suitable sanitary wear. Over half of the girls said they were embarrassed and afraid of stigma of asking for help. Red Box is a simple scheme on the island, and it's part of a movement that was set up in 2015 of actually having collection points for sanitary projects similar to food banks and supermarkets, and that there is now a number of those across the island. And local people are supplying those products, and actual boxes are then put into the schools, and local volunteers regularly place them up. Red Rock projects triggered in me a memory that I had forgotten. I was once a single parent for 8 years. I became a single parent with a 1-year-old and 2-year-old and 6-year-old, and for 18 years brought up my children on my own. I had a daughter, and one day I got a call from the school. She was round about 12 years of age, saying that could I pick her up and take her home immediately. When I got there, because she'd had an accident, when I got there I saw my daughter with basically blood on her legs and her parts of her body and clothing, and she was in a terrible state. I was told that can I make sure that she's got relevant products so that it doesn't actually happen again. I didn't know what to do. I rang up my sisters, older sisters, and they sort of put me in the right direction. So I actually went to the local supermarket and spent about 20 minutes looking at products and was very confused. And various women checkout ladies were sort of giggling to me. I then actually made a big mistake. I thought that super meant quality. And I actually also thought that quantity meant actually taking everything off the shelf that had super on it and filling 2 shopping trolleys and taking them home, because I wanted my daughter to not be in this position again. I think the women amongst it will know that actual super is the largest size. My daughter locked herself in the room saying, how could I do it to her? And I felt humiliated. I feel that after that, my daughter's now 38, so after all those years, that to actually hear that we're still in a position where actually young girls in our schools don't have to deal with it is, please, can you support this great project from volunteers of this island and go with this motion. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Whitehouse, you were first to speak.
Yes, Chair. Michael, could you turn your mic off? I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion. An amendment that treats the subject with the same respect and seriousness that Councillor Lilly has just set out. In no way does it undermine what Councillor Lilly said. It broadens it a little. I'd like to propose that the amendment means that the motion reads that this Council encourages this Council to support initiatives to ensure that all students have discreet access to the sanitary products they require. The main differences between this amendment and the substantive original motion are subtle, but it's in no way contradicting the original motion. First of all, I've done some research working with officers. We surveyed yesterday 50% of the schools on the island, and most of the schools on the island already have a project in place or are already talking to the Red Box project to make sure that they have a means for their students to access the sanitary products they require. I've deliberately made it gender neutral because that is important these days. I understand people who define themselves by a different gender to their original biological one. These people are still going to need access to sanitary products from time to time. So I've tried to take all those things into account to respect the principle of Councillor Lilly's original motion, to share with him, I think, our understanding and sympathy with the harrowing events to which he referred. I've not had to deal with those sorts of situations, despite having 3 daughters. My wife was always there to deal with that side of things, but I can imagine how challenging that must have been. So it isn't the case that nothing is already going on in our schools on the island. Quite a lot already is. Indeed, I think it's quite unimaginable, inconceivable, that any of our secondary schools, which have hundreds of teenage girls in each, would not have had to address this sort of situation on a fairly regular basis. So it should be no surprise, therefore, that most of the schools already make arrangements. But perhaps this new project and other means of council giving support can raise the profile of the existence of such help and bring greater security to a larger number of children on the island.
Councillor Lilly, do you accept that amendment?
No. Okay.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Brading.
Yes, please, Chair, if I can. Like Councillor White has said, it wasn't a subject I ever thought I'd be sitting here discussing, and I do thank Councillor Lee for raising the subject, but I do support Councillor Whitehouse's amendment, and I'll explain why. The research that Councillor Whitehouse asked officers to do, obviously I've seen the research one. I just want to share part of it with you, really. The interesting thing is that yesterday morning, every island school was emailed by my school improvement manager, and over 50% of schools responded straight away to that email. So schools are taking this issue extremely seriously. At the moment, there's already 12 primary schools, 1 secondary, and the Isle of Wight College that have signed up to the Red Box project, which I think is a really good project. But there are 3 other schools, and I'll name them actually: Cowes Primary, Dover Park and Gurnard Primary, that already have an alternative system in place, not in the Red Box system. They have alternative means of supplying the products. And I do trust all of our school leaders to adopt a scheme that will work for the young people. It's right that we do that, but I wouldn't want to be prescriptive totally about using one service. Schools have already done it their own initiative. I would like to keep doing that. Also, a lot of other primary schools have indicated they're going to sign up, and even secondaries. Cowes Enterprise College are starting the Red Box system within the next couple of weeks. Christ the King's have also now expressed interest. They want to know more information. And Ryde Academy they've got 2 boxes already, the red boxes. It's important that we do this. Will drive up attendance, and it will drive up standards. And I think it really indicates how schools are taking this absolutely seriously to address this period of poverty. And I would ask that the Council fully supports the amendment because it gives schools the flexibility. But the caveat is that when my officers go into schools, when I go into schools, it will always be on the agenda to discuss with the head teacher, what are you doing about it? It gives a bit more flexibility to a different type of scheme, but I do support the red box scheme alongside schemes that are currently in operation. So I look for the whole Council to 100% support the amended motion on a very important issue. Thank you.
Councillor Abraham, are you speaking to this amendment?
Yes, and to say the way. Push the wrong one. Sorry, apologies for that. Yes, I do support the amendment. I think it makes a critical difference, and so it has my full support. The other thing that, just as a general comment, I cannot believe that sanitary products actually attract 20% VAT. I do not think that you know, if we could actually send a message to the government, I think that is something that we ought to do. That the VAT should be taken off of these products. They're essential products. I would, you know, there are other products, safety clothes you can buy, does not attract VAT. Why on earth these products do, I have no idea. But well, unfortunately, I think that is the reason why VAT cannot be taken off.
Okay, I've got a number of people that actually put their hands up prior to the amendment that wish to speak. So can I be clear, did Councillor Jones-Evans wish to speak to the amendment or not? You? Okay. Okay. What about Councillor Brodie? You had your hand up. Do you wish to speak to the amendment or would you wish to wait? Okay. I'm going to go through my list then. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you. In a council where females are the minority by some way, it's great there's so many feminists in the room. I'll be sending you a link to the Fawcett Society. A 100 years when women first got the vote, it's great that these important issues are coming to the fore. I've been part of the movement to try and get the VAT off tampons, as we call it. There's a big pressure movement. Unfortunately, George Osborne was going to take the tax off, and apparently the European Union have put that upon us, and we levy at the lowest levy of 5%. So I'm wondering if there are any leavers in the room, there may be one or two, whether they could confirm or not whether that tax will then be taken away in the new dawn of time, post-March 2019.
Could I make a point of information to Councillor Jones-Evans, because there is a Treasury tampon tax fund. All the VAT on tampons goes into that fund and it's distributed to women's charities. So after... Yeah, but that's the EU requirement. After Brexit, it's gone.
Councillor Barry.
Yeah, I should be voting against the amendment because I don't really understand it. You're saying that if you vote for the amendment, that Councillor Lilly's amendment takes away the right of individual schools to have something other than the red box. Because all Councillor Lilly's asking you to do is support the red box scheme. If the school decides it don't want to use that scheme, well then that's fair enough. I don't see the sense in the amendment.
Councillor Stevens, you're next.
Thank you. It follows on from Councillor Barry in actual fact. If you look at what Councillor Michael Lilly's put as his motion, resolved that the Isle of Wight Council supports the Isle of Wight Red Box project and campaign in their endeavour to raise awareness and tackle period poverty. That is, if you like, part of the essence of what is being put forward here tonight, is to raise the awareness of the Isle of Wight Red Box project and campaign in their endeavour to raise awareness. The awareness has been raised in this chamber, and thank goodness it has, and I thank Councillor Lilly and indeed Councillor Whitehouse for their input, but I really feel that that is the essence of what we're here to discuss tonight and debate. It is that without that wording in there, it doesn't follow the line of the motion from Councillor Lilly. So I just feel that we need to make sure of what the motion is. And whilst I welcome Councillor Whitehouse's focus on the subject, I think that what we need to do is go back to the original motion. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Still quite a number of members wishing to speak, so I've now, Councillor Brodie, you were in line, now you've decided.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief. I'm not very clear on this, to be honest, because I think Councillor Whitehouse's amendment is slightly obscured what I think Councillor Lilly was trying to do. I don't think that was intentional, but I think what strikes me here is, firstly, a number of people, primarily women, have resolved there is a need for the Isle of Wight Red Box project for whatever reasons. And I have to accept that there are good reasons for them to do that. And therefore, I would hope that this council could support it. There's the usual stuff that we all pad our emotions out with in the middle of it, but the key element is that we're looking for the provision of free products in all schools across the island. And it strikes me that a great deal of effort has been put in by Councillors Whitehouse and Brading to get officers to do research into all of this. It's a pity, really, they could have shared that with us a little earlier than tonight, so as we could all see it. Given that Councillor Garrett was criticised by Councillor Whitehouse earlier on for not sharing information, touche, Chris, so it would have been nice to have shared that. Councillor Brady obviously has a wealth of information over there, only half of which I took in entirely. I wish we could have an agreed motion here, to be honest, that we could have some consensus around it. I don't know if Councillor Lilly and Whitehouse can, come to some agreement about it, because it strikes me that we all want to do the same thing. I think Councillor Whitehouse is more vague, whereas Councillor Lilly's original motion is more specific about a specific project. So I will vote for I will probably vote for the amendment and the motion, whether it's amended or not, because I'm entirely confused, because I like black and white, I like very clear amendments with a purpose, and I don't think that there's actually any need for this division between us over an important issue. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fuller is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to say exactly the same as what Jeff had said about I could support both motions because they're both doing something to address an issue that is probably seen as being a stigma from people from my generation and older generations. The fact that men know very little about sanitary products for girls is quite worrying, and I think we have to raise awareness concerning that. Last week I was at a meeting with Jigsaw, a fantastic charity that is based on the island, and their main purpose is to support single parents, single men in helping to support them looking after children, and they do an absolutely fantastic job. And I know that they were talking to me about some of the issues about sanitary products for girls. Again, when I was at the food bank in Cowes this morning with my colleagues from my town councils, they are, again, the food banks, I don't know whether members are aware of this, but food banks also collect sanitary products for children as well. And I think that is something that we need to embrace and respect and support. I will be voting for both motions because I think there's merits to both of them, and I think that it is a shame that Councillor Lilly and Councillor Whitehouse can't have a joint motion that we can all support. Otherwise, we're going to not be supporting one of them, or some members will feel that they're unable to support one of the motions, and that's a real shame, because we should be inclusive and we should be working together on this. Thank you.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting the amendment. There may well be many initiatives, but I first became aware of the Red Box project through the Inspiring Women group. And as a result of that, I'd just like to read you, I actually noticed that my local school I'm very involved with, the Bay, weren't on the list. And I contacted them and I got this response. Thanks, Debbie. Great idea. I'm happy to lead for it. Absolutely, we need to be involved. And I think if it wasn't, Councillor Lilly's motion specifically mentioned Red Box because it is a vehicle, if you like, that we can use to raise awareness. And as I say, I'm not aware of other initiatives, but I'm certainly aware of Red Box. So I won't be supporting the amendment, but I will be supporting Councillor Lilly's substantive motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
I'm going to take a deep breath there. I'll explain why I objected to the amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Lilly, I thought you were just going to speak to this amendment. No.
I'm going to speak against this amendment. Right, I can.
Oh, hang on, wait there.
Yeah.
No, you're fine because you haven't spoken to the amendment before.
I'm speaking against the amendment, but I wish to explain why.
Right.
I do welcome Councillor Whitehouse, support in principle. The reason why I cannot support the amendment is I have no right to, right? Because you've had a group of women who are the Isle of Wight Red Box project who have come to me, right, to actually raise this issue and actually, put it forward and actually use my position as a councillor to get press releases and actually get awareness of this subject. Therefore, it is important to actually make sure that we actually keep within the motion the Isle of Wight Red Box project. But I've listened to other councillors, and what I suggest is, can we find wording, right, that could actually keep Isle of Wight Red project, which is a national project. There's a website, and actually young women now know that, and they're actually able to link in. So I'm quite happy to have wording which says other initiatives, if there is that, but we still keep in the wording of the Isle of Wight Red Box project, because they've actually brought this thing to the level of this, and actually particularly getting into a lot of actual schools, and it's also bringing volunteers and getting donations. You've got Red Box collection boxes, not other initiatives, in the supermarkets of this town. So we need to actually, I'm happy to have some amended wording, but we cannot take away the wording of the Isle of Wight Red Box project.
Can I move and go straight to the vote, Chair? This is really silly.
Seconded. Move to the vote.
What? Why are you against the Red Box project as in the title? All right,
I mean, I was going to ask Councillor Whitehouse whether you would consider on your amendment continues to support initiatives such as the Red Box.
No, Chair. As Councillor Brady made quite clear that it would inhibit some of the schools in the projects that they're already doing.
Okay, the motion moved to... Yeah, that's what I'm just going to do. Shut up. Okay, so we've had the motion to move to the next vote, move to vote, which is by Councillor Whitehouse, seconded by Councillor Whittle. All those in favour of moving to the vote. Sorry. And those against? Okay, that motion is carried, that we move to the vote.
Just to clarify, members, what you've done is you've made a procedural vote to determine to move to the vote. So the procedure now provides for the mover of the original motion to have a right to reply, so that's Councillor Lilly. Then you take a vote on the amendment. That is procedurally what's supplied in the Constitution, Councillor Whitehouse.
Lilly.
I'm confused, right? I'm speaking to the motion. My original. I'm speaking to the amendment. So I'm summing up to the amendment. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Point of order. I'm sure that Councillor Lilly has the option to have a right of reply either at this stage of the debate or when we deal with substantive motion. He doesn't have to speak at this point. Yeah? If he doesn't have to. We are actually only dealing with the amendment from Councillor Whitehouse, nothing else.
Okay, we're going to move to the vote on the amendment, please. We've still got rather a lot of motions and we've still got half an hour of the leader's question time. So, we're moving to the vote on this amendment. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions, please? Can I have the abstentions again? Okay, that's 17 for, 10 against and 4 abstentions. That amendment is carried. This is now the substantive motion, so if any members wish to speak to this. Councillor Lilly, you've got a right of reply.
Obviously, I'm going to want to vote for this, but I actually think I need to speak on behalf of the gallant women on the island who've actually put forward this issue and have enabled it to be discussed tonight by their work, voluntary. And I actually feel that to actually take their name out of this motion, I find extremely upsetting. I told you my story because I actually felt, particularly now as I'm a grandfather of 2 girls, that we never actually, I want to see the trauma and embarrassment that they never experience the same as their aunt. I do feel, obviously I want you to vote for this, but I'm very sad, and I want it on the public record, that actually you haven't fully recognised the actual Isle of Wight Red project in actually agreeing that name and the pioneering work that they had done. but I do actually ask you to put forward this motion, and I'm very sad that Councillor Whitehouse had to wreck something that shouldn't have been political, and it should have just been about human rights. And I am very upset that another human being and someone who's spoken about things like mental health and that and has had support, and I supported another motion, is actually disgracefully belittled the work of the Red Box Project.
Okay, right, we're moving to the vote now. Moving to the vote on this, we've spent 3/4 of an hour. We've got 3 more motions and we've got half an hour of members' question time. So we're moving to the vote. All those in favour of this revised motion, please. Any against? Abstentions, please. That's 27 for, 1 against, 2 abstentions. That motion's carried. Right, moving on. Councillor Debbie Ondra.
Chair, can I just raise a point of order with you? I think it might be appropriate for us to just take a couple of minutes break to allow the monitoring officer to speak to Councillor Andre in relation to declarations of interest. I don't wish to go into detail on it, but taking a little bit of advice, it might be appropriate just before we proceed into what is a very interesting debate.
Okay. 2 minutes, that's all you've got, run.